Prince William opened his eyes slowly as the first rays of sunlight crept through the heavy curtains of his private bedroom at Buckingham Palace. The digital clock beside his bed showed 5:30 a.m., but he had been awake for the past hour, his mind racing with thoughts about the day ahead. Today was May 6, 2023, and it would change everything. His father, King Charles II, would finally receive his official coronation, and William would witness history being made right before his eyes. The prince sat up in bed and rubbed his face with both hands, trying to shake off the nervous energy that had kept him tossing and turning all night. Outside his window, he could already hear the distant sounds of London waking up for this extraordinary day. Even at this early hour, people were moving through the streets, preparing for what would become one of the most watched events in British history. Some had been camping outside since yesterday, bringing folding chairs and warm blankets, determined to catch even a glimpse of the royal family. William walked to his large window and pulled back the thick curtains completely. The sight that greeted him was absolutely breathtaking. The Mall, the famous road leading to Buckingham Palace, was already lined with people wearing red, white, and blue clothing. British flags hung from every possible surface, and temporary barriers had been set up to manage the crowds that would grow throughout the morning. The atmosphere felt electric, even from his high window, and William could sense the excitement and anticipation radiating from the gathering crowd. A gentle knock on his bedroom door interrupted his thoughts. His personal butler entered quietly, carrying a silver tray with fresh tea and the morning newspapers. The headlines were all about the coronation, with photographs of the palace and predictions about who would attend the ceremony. William picked up one newspaper and saw his own photograph on the front page, taken during a recent public appearance. The caption read, "The future king prepares for his father's big day." The words sent a small shiver down his spine. The butler informed William that his breakfast would be ready in the dining room whenever he was prepared, and that his dresser would arrive at 7 o'clock sharp to help him prepare for the day ahead. William nodded and thanked the man, but asked for a few more minutes alone. He needed this quiet time to gather his thoughts and prepare mentally for what lay ahead. This was not just another royal event or public appearance. This was the day his father would officially become the King of England, and William would step one giant step closer to his own inevitable destiny. Standing by the window again, William thought about his mother, Princess Diana, and how proud she would have been to see this day. She had always told him that being royal was both a privilege and a responsibility, and that he should never take either lightly. Diana had taught him to connect with people, to understand their struggles, and to use his position to make a positive difference in the world. Her lessons echoed in his mind as he watched the growing crowd below, all of them excited to be part of this historic moment. The weight of tradition felt heavy on William's shoulders as he prepared to shower and begin his day. In just a few hours, he would put on ceremonial clothing that represented hundreds of years of British history. He would walk through Westminster Abbey, the same ancient building where kings and queens had been crowned for nearly 1,000 years. Every step he took today would be watched by millions of people around the world, and every gesture would be analyzed and remembered. William took one final look out his window at the people gathering below. Their enthusiasm and devotion reminded him why this day mattered so much. The monarchy existed because the people supported it, and today they were showing their support in the most beautiful way possible. As he headed toward his private bathroom to begin preparing for the most important day of his father's life, William felt a mixture of nervousness, pride, and deep love for his country and his family. Prince William stepped into his private bathroom and turned on the warm water for his shower. As the steam began to fill the room, his mind drifted to thoughts of his mother, Princess Diana. She should have been here today, standing beside his father, watching with pride as her husband became the official King of England. The thought made William's chest tighten with emotion, and he had to pause for a moment to compose himself. He remembered being just a young boy when his mother would tell him bedtime stories about royal ceremonies and grand occasions. Diana would sit on the edge of his bed, her voice soft and gentle, describing the beautiful robes, the ancient crowns, and the magnificent churches where these important events took place. She made everything sound like a fairy tale, but she always made sure William understood that being royal meant serving other people, not just wearing fancy clothes and living in palaces. While the warm water cascaded over him, William recalled one particular conversation with his mother when he was about 12 years old. They had been walking through Kensington Gardens on a crisp autumn afternoon, and William had asked her what it really meant to be a prince. Diana had stopped walking and knelt down to his eye level, taking his hands in hers. She told him that being royal was like being given a special gift. But when Prince William stood in front of his full-length mirror as his personal valet, James approached with the first piece of his ceremonial coronation attire. The process of getting dressed for such an important royal occasion was far more complex than most people could imagine. Every single item had to be put on in a specific order that had been followed for hundreds of years. There were rules and traditions for everything, and breaking even the smallest tradition was simply not acceptable on a day like today. James had been helping William dress for formal occasions for over 10 years, and the two men had developed a comfortable working relationship built on trust and mutual respect. James understood that today was different from any other day they had worked together. The weight of the moment was evident in the careful way he handled each piece of clothing, and in the respectful silence that filled the room as they began the lengthy dressing process. The first item was William's ceremonial military uniform, a deep navy blue jacket with intricate gold braiding that had been hand-sewn by the finest tailors in London. The jacket fit William's tall frame perfectly, having been adjusted through dozens of fittings over the past several months. Every measurement had been checked and rechecked to ensure that the future king would look absolutely flawless on this historic day. The gold threads caught the morning light streaming through the palace windows, creating a subtle shimmer that made the uniform look almost magical. Next came the white dress shirt, with its perfectly starched collar and gold cufflinks that had belonged to William's grandfather, Prince Philip. Wearing something that had been part of his grandfather's collection made William feel connected to the long line of royal men who had come before him. Philip had been a strong influence in William's life, teaching him about duty, service, and the importance of supporting the monarchy, even when it required personal sacrifice. The most challenging part of getting dressed was attaching all the various medals, honors, and decorations that William had earned throughout his military service and royal duties. Each medal told a story of commitment and achievement. The Order of the Garter, Britain's oldest order of chivalry, was pinned carefully to his chest. The Golden Jubilee Medal, commemorating his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth's 50 years on the throne, was positioned just below it. The Afghanistan Campaign Medal, earned during his military service as a helicopter pilot, held special meaning because it represented his desire to serve his country in the same way as any other young man. James worked with steady hands and complete concentration, making sure every decoration was positioned exactly where royal protocol demanded. William watched in the mirror as each piece was added, transforming him from a regular man into someone who looked like he belonged in a history book. The change was remarkable and slightly overwhelming. The casual prince who enjoyed playing sports and spending time with his children was disappearing, replaced by a figure of state who represented centuries of British tradition and continuity. The final touch was William's ceremonial sword, attached to a leather belt around his waist. The sword had been crafted specifically for him when he became a senior working member of the royal family. Its handle was engraved with his personal coat of arms, and the blade bore the inscription, "Service before self," a motto that his mother Diana had helped him choose many years earlier. The weight of the sword against his hip reminded William of the gravity of his position and the responsibilities that came with it. When James finally stepped back to admire his work, William barely recognized himself in the mirror. Gone was the relaxed father and husband. In his place stood a man who looked every inch a future king, dressed in regalia that connected him to every monarch who had ruled Britain for over 1,000 years. The transformation was both thrilling and terrifying, beautiful and overwhelming. William took a deep breath and prepared himself for the next phase of this extraordinary day. The sound of heels clicking on the marble floor announced Catherine's arrival before William even saw her. When his wife entered the room, William's breath caught in his throat. Catherine looked absolutely stunning in her royal blue dress, a color that had been chosen specifically to complement the coronation's official color scheme. The dress was made of the finest silk, with delicate beading that sparkled subtly in the palace lighting. Her sapphire jewelry, including pieces that had once belonged to Princess Diana, completed her elegant appearance perfectly. Catherine stopped in the doorway when she saw William in his full ceremonial regalia. Her hand went to her heart, and William could see tears forming in her eyes. After more than 12 years of marriage, she still had the power to make him feel like the most important person in the world with just one look. She walked toward him slowly, taking in every detail of his appearance, from the perfectly positioned medals to the ceremonial sword at his side. "You look magnificent," Catherine whispered, reaching up to adjust a small detail on his uniform collar. Her touch was gentle and familiar, grounding William in the midst of all the formal ceremony and tradition surrounding them. In that moment, despite all the royal regalia and official protocol, they were simply a husband and wife sharing an important moment together. Catherine understood better than anyone else what this day meant to William and how much pressure he was feeling. The quiet intimacy of the moment was interrupted by the sound of children's voices in the hallway outside William's dressing room. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis came running into the room, their excitement barely contained despite the early morning hour. All three children were already dressed in their own formal coronation outfits, looking like miniature versions of their parents in their carefully chosen clothing. 9-year-old Prince George stopped short when he saw his father, his eyes growing wide with amazement. As the eldest child and third in line to the throne, George was beginning to understand the significance of royal ceremonies and the weight of the traditions his family carried. He had been to several formal events before, but seeing his father dressed as a future king was clearly having a profound impact on the young boy. Princess Charlotte, now 8 years old, ran directly to her father and hugged his legs carefully, being mindful not to disturb any of his decorations or medals. She had inherited her great-grandmother's natural confidence and poise, and she seemed completely comfortable with all the pageantry and formality of royal life. Charlotte looked up at William with admiration and pride, telling him that he looked like a real prince from one of her favorite storybooks. 5-year-old Prince Louis was more interested in the ceremonial sword than anything else, asking his father if it was sharp and if he knew how to use it properly. William knelt down carefully to his youngest son's level, explaining that the sword was mostly symbolic and represented his promise to protect and serve the British people. Louis listened intently, his young mind trying to process the complex ideas his father was sharing with him. The family stood together in front of the large mirror, and William was struck by how they looked like a portrait from a history book. Here was the future of the British monarchy, 4 people who would carry on traditions that stretched back over 1,000 years. Catherine would one day be queen, George would eventually become king, and Charlotte and Louis would spend their lives supporting their brother, just as William had always supported his father. The palace photographer knocked gently on the door, asking if the family was ready for their official pre-ceremony portraits. William looked at his wife and children, feeling overwhelmed by love and gratitude for the support they gave him every day. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, just as royal families had done for generations before them. As the family prepared to leave William's private quarters and make their way toward the ceremonial carriages, William caught sight of his reflection one final time in the ornate mirror that had hung in the palace for over 2 centuries. Something about seeing himself surrounded by his family, all of them dressed in their formal coronation attire, caused every emotion he had been carefully controlling to suddenly break free from his composed exterior. The pride he felt for his father finally achieving his lifelong dream of becoming the crowned King of England hit him like a wave. King Charles had waited over 70 years for this moment, longer than any heir in British history. Through decades of public service, personal struggles, and constant scrutiny from the media and public, his father had never wavered in his commitment to the crown and to the British people. Today would be the culmination of a lifetime of preparation and dedication. Mixed with that pride was William's own growing awareness of what lay ahead for him personally. Seeing himself dressed in the regalia of his position, he could no longer pretend that his future role as king was some distant, abstract concept. The weight of eventually becoming the head of state for not just Britain, but for multiple Commonwealth countries around the world felt suddenly very real and very immediate. The responsibility was both inspiring and terrifying. The grief that William had been managing all morning for his mother's absence became overwhelming in that moment. Diana should have been there with them, sharing in the joy and pride of the day. She should have been helping Catherine with her jewelry, laughing with the children, and offering William the reassurance that only a mother could provide. The unfairness of her absence felt particularly sharp on a day that was supposed to be about family and continuity. William's eyes filled with tears, and for several long seconds he could not speak or move. The carefully controlled royal composure that he had been maintaining since childhood cracked, revealing the deeply emotional man underneath all the titles and formal training. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to regain his composure, knowing that in just a few minutes he would need to present himself to the world as the confident, steady future king that everyone expected him to be. Catherine noticed the change in her husband immediately. Without saying a word, she moved to his side and took his hand in both of hers. Her touch was warm and steady, offering him the silent support that had sustained him through every major challenge in their life together. She understood that William needed this moment to process his emotions before stepping into his public role, and she was prepared to give him whatever time and space he required. The children sensed that something important was happening with their parents, even if they could not fully understand what it was. Prince George moved closer to his father, while Charlotte and Louis gathered around their parents with the intuitive awareness that children often have during significant family moments. The sight of his family surrounding him with love and support helped William begin to regain his emotional balance. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the people he loved most in the world, William felt both the burden and the blessing of his royal position more clearly than ever before. He was not just a man getting dressed up for a ceremony. He was a living link in an unbroken chain of service and tradition that connected the past, present, and future of his country. The realization was humbling and empowering at the same time, helping him find the strength he needed for the day ahead. The golden state carriage that would carry William and his family to Westminster Abbey was a masterpiece of craftsmanship that had been used for royal ceremonies for over 200 years. As William helped Catherine and the children settle into the plush velvet seats, he marveled at the intricate details that surrounded them. Every surface was decorated with gold leaf, precious gems, and hand-carved designs that told the story of Britain's royal heritage. The carriage itself was a rolling piece of history. As their procession began moving through the streets of London, William was amazed by the sheer number of people who had gathered to witness this historic day. The crowd stretched as far as he could see in every direction, a sea of red, white, and blue clothing, British flags, and excited faces. Some people were crying with joy, others were cheering and waving, and many were simply standing in respectful silence, understanding that they were witnessing something truly special. The diversity of the crowd was remarkable and deeply moving to William. He saw elderly people who remembered previous coronations, young families with small children experiencing their first royal ceremony, tourists who had traveled from around the world to be part of this moment, and local Londoners who had walked from their homes to join the celebration. Every face in the crowd represented a different story, but they were all united in their shared excitement for this historic day. Through the carriage windows, William could see people holding up smartphones and cameras, desperate to capture every moment of the royal procession. He smiled and waved back at them, remembering his mother's advice about always acknowledging the people who took time out of their lives to show support for the royal family. Diana had taught him that these public appearances were not just ceremonial duties, but opportunities to connect with the people who made the monarchy possible. The children were fascinated by everything they saw outside the carriage windows. Prince George asked thoughtful questions about the buildings they passed and the history behind various landmarks. Princess Charlotte waved enthusiastically at the crowd, delighting in their positive response to her gestures. Prince Louis was more interested in the horses pulling their carriage, asking his father about their names and whether they enjoyed participating in royal ceremonies. Catherine sat quietly beside William, her hand resting gently on his arm, offering him the silent support that had become second nature during their years of marriage. She understood that despite his outward calm, William was processing intense emotions about the significance of this day. Her presence beside him was both comforting and strengthening, reminding him that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as a team. As they drew closer to Westminster Abbey, the crowd became even more dense and enthusiastic. The ancient church had been the site of every British coronation for nearly 1,000 years, and its towering spires rose majestically above the surrounding buildings. William felt a profound sense of connection to all the kings and queens who had made this same journey before him, traveling through London to receive their crown in the same sacred building. The sound of church bells ringing across London added to the magical atmosphere of the morning. The bells of Westminster Abbey were joined by bells from churches throughout the city, creating a symphony of celebration that could be heard for miles. William closed his eyes for a moment and listened to the beautiful sound, letting it wash over him and fill him with a sense of peace and purpose for the ceremony ahead. The moment William stepped out of the golden carriage and onto the red carpet leading into Westminster Abbey, he felt the full weight of 1,000 years of British history settling on his shoulders. The ancient stones of the abbey seemed to whisper the names of every king and queen who had walked this same path before him. The building itself was magnificent, its Gothic towers reaching toward the sky like fingers pointing to heaven, reminding everyone present that this was not just a political ceremony, but a sacred religious occasion. The crowd of distinguished guests waiting inside the abbey was unlike anything William had ever experienced. World leaders, heads of state, celebrities, religious figures, and representatives from every Commonwealth country had gathered to witness his father's coronation. The guest list read like a who's who of global influence and power, but William was most moved by seeing the ordinary British citizens who had been invited to represent their communities and professions throughout the country. As William walked down the Abbey's central aisle, he was struck by the incredible beauty of the ancient building. Sunlight streamed through the magnificent stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the stone floor that had been walked by monarchs for nearly a millennium. The soaring ceilings seemed to reach toward infinity, creating an atmosphere of reverence and awe that was perfect for such a momentous occasion. The abbey was filled with the most beautiful music William had ever heard. The choir's voices echoed off the ancient walls, creating a sound that seemed to come from heaven itself. The organ's deep, rich tones provided a foundation for the human voices, combining to create music that was both majestic and deeply moving. William felt tears forming in his eyes as he listened to the same hymns and songs that had been sung at royal coronations for hundreds of years. Every seat in the abbey was filled with people who understood the historical significance of what they were witnessing. Foreign dignitaries sat beside British citizens, all of them united in their shared recognition that they were present for a moment that would be remembered and studied for generations to come. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and reverence, creating an energy that William could feel in every part of his being. When William took his designated seat near the front of the abbey, he had a perfect view of the coronation chair, where his father would soon be crowned. The ancient wooden chair had been used for every British coronation since 1308, and it contained the stone of Scone, a symbol of Scottish heritage that represented the unity of the different nations within the United Kingdom. The chair looked both humble and magnificent, worn smooth by centuries of use, but still radiating an aura of power and authority. The sight of his father preparing for the coronation ceremony filled William with overwhelming pride and emotion. King Charles looked dignified and serene in his ceremonial robes, ready to accept the crown that he had been preparing to wear his entire life. William could see the mixture of nervousness and excitement in his father's eyes, emotions that mirrored his own feelings about the significance of this historic day. As the ceremony began, and the Archbishop started speaking the ancient words that had been used to crown British monarchs for over 1,000 years, William felt himself becoming part of something much larger than his individual life. He was witnessing the continuation of traditions that connected the present moment to centuries of British history, and he knew that one day he would sit in that same chair and make the same solemn promises to serve and protect the British people. When the moment arrived for the actual crowning of King Charles II, Westminster Abbey fell into a silence so complete that William could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. The Archbishop of Canterbury lifted the magnificent St. Edward's crown, a masterpiece of gold and precious gems that had been used to crown British monarchs for over 300 years. The crown caught the light streaming through the Abbey's ancient stained glass windows, sending sparkles of color dancing across the stone walls and floor. William watched with intense concentration as his father bowed his head to receive the crown that would make him the official King of England. The weight of the moment was overwhelming. This was not just a ceremony or a tradition, but the actual transfer of power from one generation to the next. His father was accepting responsibility for the welfare and guidance of millions of people, not just in Britain, but throughout the Commonwealth countries that still recognized the British monarch as their head of state. The crown was lowered onto King Charles's head with deliberate care and reverence. In that instant, William's father was transformed from heir to the throne into the actual King of England. The change was both symbolic and real, marking the beginning of a new era in British history. William felt tears streaming down his face as he watched his father accept the crown with dignity and grace, knowing how long and hard the journey had been to reach this moment. The congregation in Westminster Abbey erupted in the traditional cry of "God Save the King" as the coronation was completed. The sound of thousands of voices united in celebration filled the ancient building, creating a moment of pure joy and national unity. William joined his voice with all the others, proclaiming his support for his father's reign and his commitment to the continuity of the British monarchy. When the time came for William to pay homage to his newly crowned father, he felt his legs trembling as he walked toward the coronation chair. This was one of the most important moments of his entire life, a public declaration of his loyalty and support that would be remembered and analyzed for generations to come. Every step he took was watched by millions of people around the world, and every gesture would be preserved in the historical record forever. Kneeling before his father in front of the assembled dignitaries and world leaders, William spoke the ancient words of homage that had been used by royal heirs for centuries. "I, William, Prince of Wales, do become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship, and faith and truth I will bear unto you to live and die against all manner of folks." The words felt heavy with meaning and responsibility, connecting him to every prince who had knelt before his king throughout British history. As William spoke these solemn words, he was making promises not just to his father, but to the British people and to the institution of the monarchy itself. He was pledging his life, his service, and his loyalty to something greater than himself. The weight of future responsibility settled on his shoulders as he realized that one day his own son Prince George would kneel before him and speak these same words. King Charles placed his hands on William's head in blessing, completing the ancient ritual of homage. In that moment, father and son were also king and heir, bound together by duty, love, and the sacred trust of the British people. William felt the full power of the monarchy flowing through this simple gesture, connecting past, present, and future in one unbroken chain of service and dedication. As the coronation ceremony concluded and the royal family prepared to leave Westminster Abbey, William felt fundamentally changed by everything he had experienced throughout this extraordinary day. The ancient rituals, the weight of tradition, the sight of his father being crowned, and his own moment of paying homage had combined to create a transformation that went far deeper than simply putting on ceremonial clothing and participating in a formal event. Walking back down the Abbey's central aisle, William looked at the faces of the people who had witnessed this historic moment. He saw tears of joy, expressions of pride, and looks of hope for the future of the monarchy and the country. These people had taken time from their lives to be present for something they believed was important and meaningful. Their faith in the institution of the monarchy was both humbling and inspiring, reminding William of the sacred trust that the royal family held with the British people. The return journey to Buckingham Palace in the Golden State carriage gave William time to process the emotions and realizations that had been building throughout the day. The crowds lining the streets were even larger and more enthusiastic than they had been that morning, celebrating not just the coronation, but their own participation in a moment of national unity and historical significance. The sight of so many happy faces reinforced William's understanding of why the monarchy mattered to so many people. Catherine and the children were quiet during the carriage ride, each of them processing the day's events in their own way. Prince George seemed particularly thoughtful, perhaps beginning to understand more clearly what his future would hold. Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis were tired but excited, having experienced their first major royal ceremony. Catherine squeezed William's hand gently, offering him the same silent support that had sustained him throughout the day. Back at Buckingham Palace, as William finally began the process of removing his ceremonial regalia, he looked at himself in the mirror one final time. The man staring back at him was the same person who had woken up that morning, but something fundamental had changed. He felt more connected to his role, more aware of his responsibilities, and more committed to the values and traditions that the monarchy represented. Each piece of ceremonial clothing that William removed felt significant. The medals and decorations that had represented his service and achievements, the uniform that connected him to centuries of royal tradition, and the ceremonial sword that symbolized his promise to protect and serve the British people. These items would be carefully stored away until his own coronation day, but the lessons and emotions they represented would stay with him forever. The photograph of his mother, Princess Diana, was still sitting on his dresser where he had left it that morning. William picked it up again and looked at her smiling face, feeling confident that she would have been proud of how he had conducted himself throughout this historic day. He had honored her memory by serving with dignity and grace, just as she had taught him to do when he was a young boy. As William prepared to rejoin his family for the private celebrations that would continue into the evening, he understood that he was no longer just Prince William. He was the heir to the throne who had witnessed his father's coronation, participated in ancient traditions, and accepted the weight of future responsibility. The emotional journey of this single day had prepared him for whatever challenges lay ahead in his role as the future King of England.